On a foggy October morning in 1980, thick mist blanketed the town of Pembroke, Massachusetts, as young teacher Evelyn Shaw left her home for school and never returned. Her coffee cup still steaming on the kitchen table, the house door locked from the inside, but her car vanished without a trace. The entire town was plunged into panic, while the police faced a mystery without clues, where every hypothesis led to a dead end. Many years later, the neighboring house, once owned by a taciturn neighbor, suddenly showed strange signs that reopened the cold case. No one suspected that, beneath the deep mud in the swamp south of Pembroke, the truth was still waiting to surface, and when it did, the entire community would have to confront a darker past than they ever imagined. On the morning of October 14, 1980, the town of Pembroke, Massachusetts, was still shrouded in the thick autumn fog. The rows of maples along Union Street shed golden leaves, drenched in dew, the distant sound of the school bus echoing in harmony with the wind sweeping across the serene surface of Oldham Pond. In the small wooden house on the edge of the woods, Evelyn Shaw, the 33-year-old art teacher at Duxbury High School, began her day as usual. She brewed coffee, turned on the radio for the morning news, then scribbled a few lines in her sketchbook, placed by the window. The dim morning light filtered through the curtains, illuminating the unfinished painting on the easel, an autumn scene of the town itself, the pond, the trees, and the small wooden house by the shore. Evelyn was a principled woman. She always arrived at school before 8 o'clock, never missing a class without notice. Her neighbor, Mrs. Ruth O'Donnell, often saw her leaving the house each morning, canvas bag in hand, beige sweater slung over her shoulder, her stride quick and light. That morning, Ruth saw Evelyn wave from afar before turning down the small path leading to the main road. It was 7:15. Nothing unusual, no strange cars, no one with her. By noon, when her colleagues realized she hadn't come to school, they thought she might be sick. Someone called the house, hearing only the phone ringing long into the quiet air. The afternoon passed with no contact. Her father, Arthur Shaw, who lived in Marshfield 10 miles away, began to worry when no one answered his daughter's phone. He drove through the town, the empty road covered in dry leaves. When he arrived, the silver Chevrolet usually parked in the yard was gone. He stepped onto the porch, knocked on the door, no answer. Through the window, he saw the kitchen light still on, the radio softly playing a classical tune. The front door was locked, but the back door was ajar. Inside, the dining table still held a half-empty coffee cup, and the porch rocking chair swayed in the wind. Arthur called throughout the house, his voice echoing oddly in the empty space. Evelyn's small cat curled in the corner, eyeing him with fear. There were no signs of a struggle, nothing disturbed, just absolute absence. Arthur stepped out to the backyard, scanning the foggy woods. No fresh footprints, only rustling leaves and a chill seeping into his skin. He turned back inside, his hand trembling as he picked up the landline. The familiar numbers of the Pembroke Police Department were dialed slowly, one by one. When the other end picked up, Arthur said, his voice choking, "My daughter, she's gone missing." That was the final moment of Pembroke's peaceful morning, before everything in that town began to change forever. Just 15 minutes after Arthur Shaw's call, 2 patrol cars from the Pembroke Police Department pulled up in front of the lakeside wooden house. Flashing lights pierced the thick fog, reflecting off the steel-cold water. Sergeant Michael Hanley and young officer Susan Carver stepped out, notebooks and a crime scene camera in hand. Mr. Arthur still stood on the porch, clutching his baseball cap tightly, his face pale with worry. "She never goes anywhere without telling me," he said as they entered. Hanley nodded, asking him to wait in the yard while the team checked each room. Inside, the house was neat and eerily silent. On the kitchen table sat the cooled coffee cup, next to a wall calendar marked for that morning's faculty meeting. A light jacket draped over a chair, house keys not in their usual spot on the entryway shelf. The unfinished landscape painting remained on the easel, the last brushstrokes still wet. No signs of forced entry, no strange footprints on the floor. In the bedroom, the bed was neatly made, clothes untouched in the closet. Everything suggested Evelyn had left in her daytime attire, likely for work, but never arrived where she was supposed to be. Susan opened the back window, checking the steps leading to the wooded path. The mud was still wet from last night's rain, no new shoe prints. Hanley jotted notes, his eyes lingering on the coffee cup. "Was it warm?" he asked. Susan touched it lightly, shook her head. The coffee was completely cold, indicating Evelyn had left hours before her father arrived. Police photographed the entire space, collecting a few personal items for fingerprint comparison. Arthur stood on the porch, silently peering through the glass. He tried to stay calm, but a vague fear welled up inside him. Hanley stepped out to reassure him. "We'll start an official missing persons file. She might just have a minor mishap. Don't worry too much." But his voice lacked conviction. Evelyn was a teacher, lived orderly, had no reason to vanish in broad daylight. That evening, the house lights burned all night. A small team combed the Oldham Pond area, flashlights scanning along the shoreline and the dirt road leading to the highway. Neighbors gathered, whispering. Mrs. Ruth O'Donnell confirmed she'd seen Evelyn that morning, alone, no cars parked nearby. Police took her statement, marking the last sighting around 7:15. By midnight, as the search paused, Hanley sat in the patrol car filling out the report. Subject: Evelyn Shaw, female, 33 years old, teacher, missing under unknown circumstances. No signs of foul play at the scene. The phrase "no signs of foul play" was underlined, more for self-reassurance than conclusion. Before leaving, Hanley discussed with Arthur checking nearby hospitals and contacting Duxbury colleagues to confirm she hadn't shown up at school. Mr. Arthur nodded, his voice trembling. "I know something's wrong, sir. My daughter never skips class. She loves her job." The words hung in the empty space, silencing both officers. Around 3 a.m., as the patrol team departed, Arthur still stood alone on the porch, gazing at the darkening house. The night wind blew strong, carrying the dampness of the pond and the scent of decaying leaves. He locked the door, turned on the kitchen light again, sat down at the wooden table with the morning newspaper and cold coffee cup. Outside, the thick fog enveloped the pond once more, swallowing all sounds. In his mind, only one thought remained. Evelyn was gone, and perhaps, the worst had just begun. The next morning, news of art teacher Evelyn Shaw's disappearance spread throughout Pembroke. Flyers with her photo and the word "missing" were posted on utility poles, church bulletin boards, and roadside grocery stores. Police mobilized more search teams, coordinating with volunteers, rescue squads, and neighborhood residents. A temporary command post was set up right in front of her house, where Officer Hanley and colleague Susan Carver mapped the area, marking every trail segment and river branch around Oldham Pond. October in Massachusetts was cold and damp, the fog so thick that the pine trees along the woods were mere shadowy silhouettes. The dogs' barks echoed through the quiet space, interspersed with the static of walkie-talkies. Dozens of people walked in a line, each with a flashlight, combing every bush and ancient tree trunk. The beige sweater mentioned in the flyer drew everyone's attention, but for hours, they found only scraps of dry leaves, old footprints, and faint tire tracks on the dirt road, nothing conclusive. By afternoon, the search team found the first item, a gray wool scarf caught on a low branch, nearly a mile from Evelyn's house. Mrs. Ruth O'Donnell confirmed it was the one she often wore to school each morning. Hanley carefully bagged it as evidence, a flicker of worry in his eyes. Not far away, by the edge of Oldham Pond, another officer shouted, "There's a slide mark down to the bank here." Everyone rushed over. The mud was still wet, a long streak running from the grass edge right to the water, but no footprints leading back. No one dared voice the thought crossing their minds. Hanley signaled a halt, requesting the rescue divers to check the shallow water area. As the small boat cut through the fog, Arthur Shaw stood silently by the shore, trembling hands clutching his cap. He said nothing, just stared at the murky water where his daughter used to stroll each afternoon. A few local reporters began arriving, camera flashes popping, capturing the image of the lone father amid the gray chill. The search continued until late evening. No body, no new clues. Hanley announced preliminary results. Nothing additional found. Will resume in the morning. Volunteers quietly packed up, the smell of mud and water clinging to their jackets. Night fell, police car lights reflecting on the pond like solitary sparks in the fog. The following day, the search expanded to Route 14 and the Western Hills, where a few people reported seeing a silver car pass by the morning Evelyn vanished. Police called in a canine unit from Brockton. This time, the dog named Duke paused repeatedly near a trail leading to the highway, barking loudly then whining, but upon close inspection, they only found a few wool fibers matching the scarf's material. Police took samples to the lab, hoping for DNA traces, though technology back then was still limited. 3 days passed, all efforts at a dead end. Police began considering other possibilities: accident, voluntary departure, or abduction. Hanley didn't believe the first two. "She's not the type to just disappear like that," he whispered to Susan while eyeing Evelyn's photo on the command table. In this small town, everyone knew each other, and nothing was more terrifying than someone vanishing suddenly in broad daylight without a sound. On the third afternoon, the official search was paused due to worsening weather, steady drizzle, wind whistling through the woods in prolonged whispers. Arthur Shaw remained by the pond, despite police urging him to rest. He bent down to pick up a leaf drifting near the shore, clutching it tightly. The wind tore at a flyer on a nearby pole, Evelyn's gentle face fluttering in the rain, as if trying to escape the dreadful silence enveloping all of Pembroke. 2 days after the search was paused, a call to the Pembroke police station early in the morning brought the tension back to the duty room. A man named Ray Bolton, driving a truck along Route 14, said he had seen a silver car parked deep in an abandoned lot near the turnoff to the Pinecrest Forest. "I saw it there for 2 days straight. That spot's real quiet. No one would leave a car like that." Ray's gravelly voice came over the phone. Sergeant Hanley immediately dispatched a car to the scene. He and Officer Carver left the station in the thin morning mist, the gray sky like a layer of ash. Evelyn's silver Chevrolet was hidden behind a row of maples, covered in a thick layer of fallen leaves. The license plate was confirmed immediately. No mistaking it. The car was locked, no signs of forced entry, but what caught Hanley's attention was the streak of mud on the tires. It looked like it had turned in here from the main road, then stopped, never turning back out. The driver's side door was slightly ajar, and inside, the driver's seat was pushed all the way back, as if someone taller than Evelyn had sat there. Susan opened the car door, taking a deep breath. The smell of old leather and dampness hung heavy inside. On the passenger seat was Evelyn's purse, her wallet and ID still intact. In the small compartment were a few coins, a little notebook with her teaching schedule jotted down, and a receipt for gas at the Gulf Station in Duxbury on October 13th, 1 day before she disappeared. Everything stopped after that. No signs of a struggle, no bloodstains, but an uneasy feeling crept into that quiet air, as if someone had carefully staged the car to sit still in this place. Hanley circled the car, his eyes scanning the damp ground. "Over here, Susan," he called softly. A few meters from the tail end was a long streak of mud leading toward the trail. The footprints weren't clear, but they were larger than a woman's foot. They photographed it, marked the spot, then opened the trunk. Inside was just a thin blanket and a few small items, nothing suspicious. Hanley sighed, crouching down to peer closely at the trunk floor, where faint light filtered through the leaf gaps. A small beige fabric thread caught on the rear latch, matching the sweater Evelyn often wore. He removed it carefully, placing it in an evidence bag. As the car was towed back to the station, locals gathered on both sides of the road, watching silently. A few recognized it, whispering to each other, "That's Miss Shaw's car." The news spread quickly, stirring a fresh wave of fear in the already shaken town. Someone murmured, "If the car's here, where is she?" No one answered. At the station, the car was sealed off and examined meticulously. The preliminary results found no blood, but there were unfamiliar fingerprints on the driver's side door, none matching Evelyn or her family. The techs kept samples for later comparison. Meanwhile, Arthur Shaw was called in to identify the items in the car. When he saw the purse, he nearly buckled. "She always carried this," he said quietly, his voice breaking. That evening, Hanley sat alone in his office, staring at the large map on the wall. From Evelyn's house to where the car was found was just over 3 miles, a quiet road with little traffic. If someone had taken her, they knew the route, knew the area. He circled the Pinecrest Forest area with a red pen, an area that hadn't been thoroughly searched due to the rugged terrain and deep mud. "Tomorrow we go back there," he told Susan over the phone before turning off the lights and leaving the station. Outside, a light rain began to fall. In the flickering streetlight glow, raindrops gathered on the towed car's windshield, slowly sliding down, leaving long streaks like silent tears. In the Pembroke police impound lot, the silver Chevrolet sat quietly in the darkness, as if keeping the answer all to itself, the one everyone dreaded hearing. The next morning, as the rain let up, the Pembroke Police Department shifted the investigation toward Evelyn Shaw's personal relationships. Hanley held a quick meeting with the team, ordering a review of the list of her closest contacts, colleagues, neighbors, friends, and especially any men she'd had romantic ties with. If the car wasn't stolen, the wallet's still there. This isn't a petty theft, he said, his voice low. We're looking for someone she knew. The first name that came up was Peter Langford, Evelyn's ex-boyfriend. They'd broken up less than a year ago, but several people said Peter had tried to rekindle things. When police arrived at his place in Duxbury, Peter was cooperative but visibly tense. I haven't seen her in months, he said, fiddling with his cigarette. Last time was at the coffee shop on Main Street, just chatted a bit. Hanley looked him straight in the eye. Did you know she was missing? Peter nodded, avoiding his gaze. He said that on the morning of October 14th, he'd been at work at the machine shop with witnesses to confirm. However, when asked if he'd ever driven past the Pinecrest area, Peter hesitated before saying, I drive through there for work sometimes, but not that morning. The answer made Hanley jot a quick note in his pad, without comment. The second suspect was Henry Cole, the neighbor who lived just 2 houses down from Evelyn. A quiet man around 40, he'd helped her fix a fence the previous summer. Ruth O'Donnell said he seemed overly interested, often stopping by to check on her when she got home late from teaching. When brought in for questioning, Henry was calm but cold. I liked her as a neighbor, that's all, he said. That morning I was walking the dog at 7, didn't see anyone. Hanley asked, did you notice her car leaving the house? Henry replied immediately, no, she must have left earlier. His voice was even, but Susan noticed his hands clasped tightly, nails digging into skin. One detail caught the police's attention. Henry's dog, according to neighbors, came home that day with strange mud on its paws, even though it hadn't rained yet. Hanley requested a check of his shoes. In the interrogation room, Henry pursed his lips, reluctantly removing them. A small scratch appeared on the back of his right hand. Henry said it was from getting scratched while pruning in the garden. Hanley noted it, took a sample of the mud from the shoes, and sent it to the lab. Meanwhile, investigator Susan went to the school where Evelyn taught to dig further. A colleague said Evelyn had complained about someone stalking her a few weeks before she vanished, but didn't specify who. The colleague only remembered her seeming scared when mentioning someone who wouldn't let go of the past. That detail turned police attention back to Peter Langford. Despite his alibi, every theory was now on the table. That evening, Hanley wrote in his report, no clear evidence of wrongdoing. However, Henry Cole's behavior shows unusual anxiety. Continue monitoring. He looked at Evelyn's photo on his desk, the gentle smile in the frame, weighing heavy on him. Outside, the fog thickened again, blanketing the quiet rooftops of Pembroke. In the dim yellow streetlight glow, shadows moved along the sidewalks, like vague silhouettes. Who among them was hiding something? News of teacher Evelyn Shaw's disappearance quickly spread beyond the town of Pembroke. After police confirmed they'd found her car in the Pinecrest forest, local papers began running stories non-stop. The big headline on the front page of that weekend's Boston Globe read, 33-year-old teacher vanishes mysteriously in Pembroke. Car found, no trace. Reporters flooded the once peaceful small town, setting up cameras right outside the wooden house by Oldham Lake where Evelyn had lived. Every day, as Arthur opened the door to step out, flashes went off, questions barraging him. Who do you think did this? Was she abducted? Has the family received any threats? He didn't answer, just bowed his head and walked silently through the lenses. The Pembroke Police Department also began facing heavy pressure. Sergeant Hanley barely had time to sleep anymore. The phone in his office rang constantly. Locals reporting saw a woman like Evelyn in Quincy, heard screams last night, near 3A, or saw a similar car heading toward Marshfield. Every call was logged and checked, but they all turned out to be dead ends. Panic in the community spread faster than the facts. Ruth O'Donnell said that, in just a few days, kids on the street weren't allowed to walk to school alone anymore. Every door was locked tight from dusk. The media turned it into a focal point. Boston area radio shows discussed it non-stop, bringing in experts for analysis, even speculating it was a string of connected disappearances, though police hadn't confirmed any similar cases. Hanley gave a brief statement at the press conference, "We're actively investigating and asked the public for cooperation. Spreading rumors will only hinder us," but that wasn't enough to quench the thirst for info. The more silence, the more the public imagined. Some started suspecting Henry Cole, the quiet neighbor, because he always looked over at Evelyn's house every evening. Others gossiped that ex-boyfriend Peter Langford had once threatened to make her regret it. Police had to assign extra officers to protect both men from the malicious rumors. Henry got angry seeing reporters at his door, yelling, "You people don't know anything, leave me alone." And Peter, caught on camera sneaking a shot at the machine shop, threw his hard hat to the ground, growling, "I didn't do anything, what does her disappearance have to do with me?" Each action got twisted in the papers, as if they were hiding guilt. For Arthur Shaw, the pressure was even more crushing. Every night, he sat in the living room, watching the TV screen replay his daughter's image, the photo from her graduation, bright eyes and kind smile, captioned "Still missing." He turned off the TV, but the anchor's voice echoed in his head. 3 weeks gone by, and police still have no official suspect. In the internal briefing, Hanley told his team, "If we don't make progress, the media will turn this into a witch hunt." He slashed the red pen across the map, circling the Pinecrest Forest, where the car was found. "Tomorrow, we go back there. We can't let this sink in rumors." Outside, the autumn rain started falling again, heavy drops drumming on the station's metal roof, like the slow ticking of an investigation running out of patience. The third search began in the biting cold of late October. The northeast wind howled through the bare rows of trees around Oldham Lake, dragging along a chilling mist that cut into the skin like a knife. Under the gloomy sky, the Pembroke police team and a weary group of volunteers slogged through paths that had been marked red from previous efforts. Each time they returned, the Pinecrest Forest seemed thicker, swallowing up every search effort. Hanley led the way, his flashlight sweeping slowly over the ground, eyes probing for any traces that might still remain. "If she was ever here, we have to see something," he said softly. But his own voice no longer held the conviction it once had. For days they expanded the search area to the southern hills, where a small stream ran through the marshy region. Boots sank deep into the mud, coats were soaked through, bodies exhausted to the bone. They found a few scraps of torn paper, an old glove that didn't belong to Evelyn, and a rusty keychain of no value. Each time someone shouted "found something," everyone froze, hearts pounding, only to sigh in relief when it turned out to be just a piece of wood or floating trash. That sense of letdown repeated itself until it wore them down to numbness. The media, after weeks of clamor, began to pull back. Reporters moved on to new stories, leaving the small town with a heavy silence. The missing Evelyn Shaw flyers were faded by wind and rain, their corners curling on telephone poles. Mrs. Ruth O'Donnell still occasionally brought flowers to place in front of Evelyn's house, while Mr. Arthur rarely left his porch. Each afternoon, he sat there, gazing down the small road leading into the woods, as if expecting that familiar figure to appear around the bend. In the police station, Hanley sat before the notepad, lines in red, blue, and black scribbling names, times, locations. He added another slash to the box. Day 25. No new discoveries. Susan Carver, tired but still resolute, asked quietly, "Do you think she's still alive?" Hanley paused his pen, staring out the fogged window. "I've seen a lot of cases," he replied, "but never one like this. No clues, no traces, like she just dissolved into thin air." His words left a long silence. That night, Arthur Shaw came to the station, carrying a small box of old photos of Evelyn. He handed it to Hanley, his voice hoarse. "If you find anything else, please let me know. I just need to know where my daughter is." Hanley looked at the elderly man, eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep, his heart twisting. "I promise you, we won't give up," he said, though deep down, his own faith was slowly draining away. In the following days, the temperature plummeted, rain turning to light snow. The search force dwindled, then officially paused at the start of November. The final announcement was read briefly. No additional new traces found. The disappearance of Evelyn Shaw will continue to be investigated upon receipt of supplemental information. The townsfolk heard the news and sighed, a mix of sorrow and apprehension. An unfinished feeling enveloped all of Pembroke, like something was still lurking in the forest canopy behind the lake. That evening, snow fell in flurries, blanketing the roof of Teacher Shaw's house with a thin white layer. The lights inside remained on, thanks to Mr. Arthur lighting them each night. He believed that if his daughter was alive somewhere, that light would guide her home. But on the other side of the lake, where footprints from years ago had been erased by the wind, only an absolute silence remained, and a case slowly going cold, as the last flicker of hope died out in the approaching winter. That winter dragged on slowly, and bitterly cold. As snow blanketed the town of Pembroke, Evelyn Shaw's disappearance gradually turned into a story retold with sighs, then sank like the thick ice over Oldham Lake. After more than 2 months of fruitless searching, the police department officially disbanded the on-scene investigation team and transferred the file to the Plymouth County office. All that remained was a thin dossier, a few crime scene photos, witness statements, and a list of leads mostly crossed out. Hanley turned in the Pinecrest Forest map, marked with dozens of symbols, then quietly filed it away in a drawer. He knew that from that moment, teacher Evelyn's case had entered the cold case list, files left unsolved, potentially forgotten forever. The police never officially declared her dead, but everyone understood it was inevitable. Public opinion quieted, the press stopped publishing articles, old flyers were swept away by the wind from bulletin boards. The wooden house by the lake, once lit up every evening, now lay in darkness. Arthur Shaw still lived in Marshfield, but rarely went out. He quietly kept the habit of sending letters to the police each year, reminding them don't forget Evelyn. His letters were filed with the case records, placed right under the bold letters closed, pending new evidence. In the years that followed, new cases erupted one after another in the area, keeping the police force busy. New generations of investigators arrived, none remembering Evelyn Shaw clearly beyond the dry summaries in reports. Sergeant Hanley retired in 1992, carrying in his mind the image of that foggy morning when they found the car. He still often told old colleagues, "I hate endings like this. No body, no justice." But those words just drifted away in cigarette smoke, like a private regret. As time went on, the town of Pembroke changed. Old wooden houses were replaced by new subdivisions. The dirt road into Pinecrest Forest was widened into asphalt. Oldham Lake became a spot for fishing and camping, and only a few elderly folks remembered that a young teacher had once vanished nearby. Mrs. Ruth O'Donnell passed away in 2001, leaving behind just one photo of Evelyn, in a silver frame on the windowsill, the photo that people still kept as a memento of a time not yet forgotten. In March 2012, Arthur Shaw died at age 86. In his will he left just one short line: "If anyone finds Evelyn, bury her next to me." That letter was sent back to the police department, like a final reminder from a father who had hoped unceasingly for 3 decades. When Hanley heard the news through an old acquaintance, he sat for a long time by his own window, watching the first spring rain fall outside. For him, Evelyn Shaw's case wasn't just an open file, it was an ellipsis between 2 generations of police, those who had passed, and those who never even knew who she was. Months passed, the cold storage file cabinets in the archives growing thicker by the day. On the brown spine of the file labeled #8104, the name Evelyn M. Shaw still lingered, covered in a thin layer of dust. No one knew that, more than 40 years later, that very file thought dead in silence would be reopened, and light brought back to a place swallowed by darkness for too long. 40 years after Evelyn Shaw vanished, the fall of 2020 draped the town of Pembroke in an eerie quiet. Oldham Lake remained deep blue, Pinecrest Forest now a place for morning walks and jogs. No one remembered the teacher from long ago, at least not until a young woman stepped into the Plymouth Police Department office on a foggy October morning. Her name was Erin Vaughn, 36 years old, a new investigator with the Massachusetts Cold Case Unit, just transferred from Boston. Erin had a calm demeanor, steadfast eyes, and an unchanging habit. Whenever starting a case, she always spent the whole morning rereading the original file, even the seemingly meaningless pages. That day, as she entered the basement storage room, thousands of old files lined the shelves. The smell of damp paper and the dust of time made her sneeze lightly. A cabinet in the corner bore the label, 1980, 1989, UN-solved cases. Erin randomly pulled out a thin file, its cover reading, #8104, Evelyn M. Shaw, missing person Pembroke. She read the name, slowly flipping to the first page. The report unfolded, like a buried memory. October 14, 1980, unexplained disappearance. No signs of foul play. Victim's vehicle found at Pinecrest Forest. She skimmed through each photo: the lakeside wooden house, the silver Chevrolet, the gray scarf caught on a branch. The images had faded, but the father's eyes in the old photo, Arthur Shaw, still made her pause for a long time. Erin took the file to her desk. She read through the afternoon, taking meticulous notes. No body, no biological evidence, no DNA testing. Technology didn't exist at the time. The last line made her freeze. 40 years ago, police lacked the tools to decode it, but now it was different. She looked up, calling the Massachusetts State Forensics Lab, to ask about procedures for recovering and testing old evidence. If the samples are still preserved, we can try genealogical DNA techniques, the lab tech replied. Erin jotted down the address of the Plymouth Evidence Storage, where samples from Evelyn Shaw's case might still be tucked away somewhere. 3 days later, she drove to the warehouse. The elderly manager named Frank recognized the case number as soon as she mentioned it. "Oh, the Pembroke one. It's been ages. No one's asked about it," he said, flipping through the logbook. It took them nearly an hour to locate the small wooden box, labeled E. Shaw, property. Inside were a few items collected from the car: the gray scarf, a teacher's notebook, a beige fabric scrap wrapped around the door hook, and a small cloth piece in a nylon bag, marked "collected from seat." Erin stared at it for a long time. Though time had faded the colors, she still felt something alive in these scraps of evidence, a chance to hear Evelyn speak again. She signed the receipt form, carefully resealing, and taking the samples to the Boston lab. When submitting the file, she noted objective DNA analysis, cross-reference with CODIS system, expand if needed via genealogy match. The young technician took the samples, smiling high hopes for a 40-year-old case. Erin replied curtly, "I just need 1%, because for Evelyn 40 years is too long already." That evening, back at the small hotel near the lake, Erin sat by the window, gazing through the fog blanketing the water. She opened her laptop, typing the first lines of her report. Purpose: identify persons of interest in the 1980 disappearance of Evelyn Shaw. Belief: the case was never truly closed. Outside, the autumn chill wind swept through the rows of trees. Somewhere in Pembroke, old secrets still waited to be found, and for the first time in 4 decades, someone had returned to listen to them. The Massachusetts State Crime Lab is located in South Boston, in a cold concrete building lit by pale white fluorescent lights. On the morning of October 23rd, Erin Vaughn carried the evidence box from the Evelyn Shaw case and handed it over to the Forensic Examination Department. The technician in charge, Dr. Lydia Tran, greeted her with a calm smile, but her eyes still flickered with skepticism, a familiar reflex when someone mentioned a 40-year-old case. "I'm not promising anything," Lydia said as she opened the box. "This fabric sample is very old. The DNA might have completely degraded." Erin just nodded. "Just try." They began the recovery process. Under the dim blue light of the sterile chamber, Lydia carefully placed the piece of fabric on a glass tray, using tweezers to pluck out tiny fibers, separating the part with the dried blood. The old centrifuge hummed loudly as it started up. Erin stood outside the glass door, watching the forensic specialist's every move as if witnessing a sacred ritual. To her, those scraps of material weren't just evidence, they were the last remnants of a forgotten human being. 3 days later, Lydia called while Erin was reviewing old witness files at the office. "I have news for you," Lydia said, her voice tinged with excitement. "We extracted the DNA, clearer than I thought. The sample is from a female, confirmed to belong to Evelyn Shaw. But there's another part, a mixture containing traces of an unidentified male." Erin jumped to her feet. "Can you compare it to the CODIS database?" "We're doing it. If we're lucky, we'll have results within 48 hours. The next 2 days were the longest of Erin's career. She barely left her desk, alternately rereading the original files and reviewing the list of suspects cleared in 1980. Peter Langford, alibi confirmed. Henry Cole, neighbor, couldn't prove where he was the morning Evelyn disappeared. In her gut, a vague hunch began to form. That afternoon on the 28th, Lydia sent a brief text, "CODIS match, call me." Erin immediately turned her car toward the lab. In the room, Lydia opened her computer and displayed the analysis results. "No match with any existing criminal records," she explained, "but we did a genealogical gene comparison and found a sequence matching the Cole family profile residing in Massachusetts and Maine." Erin held her breath. "Cole, are you sure?" Lydia nodded. "It matches at the distant relative level, high likelihood of being blood related to someone with the Cole surname." Erin said nothing more. She knew they'd just touched something the 1980 police had never had a chance to see, a real lead. She requested a copy of the report, thanked Lydia, then drove straight back to Pembroke. Outside the window, the October sky was streaked with the day's final golden light, and the Pinecrest Woods appeared in the rearview mirror like a long dark streak. In her mind, the name Henry Cole came into sharp focus, linked to the old notation in the Hanley file, unusual signs of anxiety. That evening, Erin sat in her small rooming house by Oldham Lake, opening the black and white photos from the case again. She zoomed in on the image of Henry from the old interrogation record: cold eyes, faint smile, hands with scratches. Under the desk lamp, the freshly printed DNA report was still warm. Partial familial match, Cole lineage confirmed. She placed the two papers side by side, one from 1980 and one from 2020. 40 years separated by technology, but the truth still lay between them, waiting for someone to touch it. Erin sighed, writing in her investigation journal, "For the first time in 4 decades, the Evelyn Shaw case has a specific direction. DNA shows the perpetrator has blood ties to the Cole family. Need to verify demographics, find living relatives." She closed the notebook and looked out at the dark lake surface beyond the window. Night mist drifted slowly, the moonlight reflecting faintly on the water, the place where they had once searched for Evelyn 40 years ago. And in that moment, Erin understood, the real investigation was just beginning. The next morning, Erin Vaughn arrived at the Pembroke Police Department, while fog still blanketed the lakeside rooftops white. The weathered sign of the headquarters, Pembroke Police Department, had faded over the years, but her footsteps rang firm on the steps. In Erin's hand was the freshly printed DNA report, clamped tightly in a plastic file folder. She hadn't slept all night, flipping through every page of the case, feeling both exhilarated and cautious. 40 years of waiting, and now the Evelyn Shaw case could be illuminated again. Police Chief Mark Donnelly, the gray-haired man, who had been a young officer in 1980, received her in his office. He looked at the report Erin placed on the desk, silent for a long moment before quietly saying, "I never thought I'd see this day." Erin opened her laptop and briefly presented the analysis results. The DNA on the evidence matches the gene sequence of the Cole family line. No matching record in CODIS, meaning this person was never arrested, but the probability of close blood relation is virtually certain. "I believe the perpetrator has family ties to Henry Cole." Donnelly leaned back in his chair, exhaling a long breath. "Henry, God, I still remember him." Her neighbor, Hanley, suspected him, but there was no evidence. He stood up and walked to the board hanging with photos of unsolved cases in the office, where Evelyn Shaw's face was still there, among dozens of others. "Are you sure we can reopen this?" he asked. Erin replied firmly, "Yes. I want to retrieve the full interrogation records of Henry Cole and his relatives. I also need a warrant for demographic access to identify living Cole family members. Possibly one of them carries the same DNA." That afternoon, Erin and 2 young officers began digging deep into all the old files again. Each brittle yellowed page was scanned, each statement cross-checked. In the 1980 record, Henry said he was home gardening the morning Evelyn disappeared, but no one could verify it. Hanley's marginal note read, "Calm demeanor, but hands sweating profusely." Erin read it again, smiling faintly. The old investigator's intuition had turned out to be far more accurate than the evidence of the time allowed. She contacted Linda Cole, Henry's sister, now living in Augusta, Maine. The initial phone call was full of hesitation. Linda, now nearly 70, faltered when she heard Evelyn's name mentioned. "I remember that case. Henry passed away over 10 years ago. Why bring it up again?" Erin kept her voice gentle. "I'm reviewing the files, and there are some new scientific developments. I just need to talk to you in person, if possible." Finally, Linda agreed to meet, but her voice trembled slightly. "I'm not sure I want to know anything more, Miss Vaughn." At the same time, Erin sent a formal request to the Plymouth County office to officially reopen the Evelyn Shaw investigation as potential homicide, pending DNA confirmation. In her submission, she wrote, "Thanks to advances in forensic technology, the 1980 case now has a specific investigative direction. New evidence provides sufficient basis to re-evaluate involved individuals." When Donnelly signed the document, the red Pen stamp came down on file #8104, a dry sound that seemed to echo through the entire room. That evening, Erin returned to her rooming house by Oldham Lake, looking out the window at the still black water. Lights from the boat dock reflected, swaying gently. She felt like Evelyn was out there somewhere, still waiting for someone to call her name. She opened her notebook and wrote the first line of the new phase, Evelyn Shaw case officially reopened. Suspect with ties, Henry Cole, neighbor, deceased. Next step, verify identity, trace relics, work with relatives to expand DNA genealogy. As she closed the notebook, Erin whispered to herself, "Evelyn, I've found the way in." In the quiet space, there was only the sound of wind over the lake, like a faint reply from the past, soft but enough to let her know that the journey to find the truth had truly just begun. A week after the Evelyn Shaw file was officially reopened, Erin Vaughn and the Plymouth County investigation team headed to Duxbury, the former home of Henry Cole, the deceased neighbor and first suspect in the case. His old house sat at the end of an oak-shaded road, a two-story wooden structure painted gray-green, windows dust-covered, weeds overgrown along the path. The current owners, a young couple who had recently bought it, allowed the police to search after Erin presented the court order. "We don't know anything about the previous owner," the wife said, her voice low, "but while cleaning the basement multiple times, I've noticed a damp, unpleasant smell, like something buried for a long time." The words made Erin shiver briefly. She entered with two other officers, Miller and Torres. Everything in the house was almost unchanged. Old wooden walls, peeling wallpaper, and a half-open staircase leading to the basement. Erin turned on her flashlight, the beam sweeping over each spiderweb-covered step. The basement was cold and dark, with a low ceiling, smelling of metal and mold. Old wooden crates were stacked, most labeled tools and storage. Miller bent down to a locked crate with a rusty latch. Erin signaled, "Open it." When the lid popped up, inside was a small wooden box, engraved on the outside with HC and the year 1981. Erin opened the box, her heart pounding. Inside were a few odd items, an old keychain, a much-folded yellowed map, and a small silver necklace with an oval pendant, engraved with the initials ES. The room fell silent. Torres whispered, "My God, Evelyn Shaw." Erin said nothing, just reached into her pocket for an evidence seal bag. As the light hit the pendant, dust swirled faintly, as if time had been pulled back 40 years. On the map were black ink markings, circling an area in the woods south of Pembroke, near the Marshfield border. Along the edge was a scrawled note, "Deep water, no one comes." Erin examined it closely, feeling a chill. She knew that woods an area overlooked in the initial 1980 searches, due to the marshy terrain. "God, Henry, what did you do?" she murmured. The forensic tech team was called in right after. They photographed, collected soil samples and remaining fingerprints on the box lid. While scanning further around the basement, they discovered a section of brick wall with a fresh patch, different color from the rest. Erin requested a metal detector and ground-penetrating radar. The device emitted a faint signal. When the wall section was broken open, behind it was just an empty niche containing a rusted tin box. Inside, besides a few nearly rotted old papers, was a small beige fabric scrap, the same type as the sample found in Evelyn's car 40 years earlier. Erin stood motionless, looking at the sealed evidence pile, flashing lights from the forensics van outside, reflecting off the walls. Outside, wind from the woods blew through, leaves rustling like the faint whisper of buried secrets. She knew she'd just found the biggest break in the case, a concrete piece, connecting Henry Cole directly to Evelyn Shaw. That evening, as the evidence truck left the tree-lined road, Erin looked back at the house one last time. The second-floor window was still ajar, thin curtains swaying lightly in the wind, casting a faint golden light like a watchful eye. She thought to herself, perhaps Henry Cole had taken his secret to the grave, but he hadn't counted on these old walls still holding on to everything. In the report sent back to the county office that night, Erin wrote, "Search of Henry Cole's former home, seized evidence directly related to victim Evelyn Shaw, including necklace engraved with initials, Pembroke Woods map, fabric sample matching 1980 evidence." Conclusion: Henry Cole likely directly involved in the abduction and concealment of the victim. She closed the notebook, looked up at the fog-shrouded night sky, knowing that tomorrow Pembroke's past would be forced to rise again. 3 days after completing the search of Henry Cole's old house, Erin Vaughn returned to the office with a stack of old archived files backed up from the Plymouth County Archives. She sat in the dimly lit room, the desk lamp casting light on a board scribbled with red arrows connecting names, locations, and evidence. In the center of the board was a black and white photo of Henry Cole, the man with an indifferent gaze from his 1980 interrogation. Below the photo was a handwritten note from Sergeant Hanley. No evidence of crime, conflicting demeanor. Aaron read those notes over and over, then opened the original audio recording, which had just been digitized by the archives from an old tape reel. The sound was scratchy and distorted, but Hanley's voice was still clear. On the morning of October 14th, where were you, Henry? At home, trimming trees in the yard. I didn't go anywhere. Henry's voice was dry, with a slight tremor at the end of the sentence. Did anyone see you at home? No. I was alone. Aaron paused the recording, jotting down a short note. No witnesses to confirm. One-sided statement. She opened the second part, where Hanley asked about the relationship between Henry and Evelyn. She was kind, I helped her a few times. Fixed the fence. That's all. Henry replied. Then there was a long silence, followed by Hanley's soft voice. Did you ever feel like she was avoiding you? For a moment Henry gave a faint laugh. I had no reason to follow anyone. Aaron rewound, listening more closely. Amid the sound of the chair shifting and hurried breaths, she realized Henry had changed his tone at the end. A small detail, but enough to confirm what Hanley had once intuited: he was lying. She continued searching the marginal notes in Hanley's old notebook, which no one had noticed for decades. One entry read, a resident reported seeing Henry's car leave the house around 7:30 a.m., heading toward Pinecrest. Unable to verify because the witness moved away right after. Aaron circled that detail in red, then opened the 1980 map. The route from Henry's house to the Pinecrest woods was exactly 3 miles, matching the location where Evelyn's car was found. He lied about not leaving the house, she muttered, adding to her notebook, car in motion. No one witnessed Henry at home. Statement false. That evening, she and Officer Miller went to the home of the old witness mentioned in the file, Tom Gallagher, now in his 70s, living in Hanover. The old man opened the door, and when Aaron mentioned the Pembroke case from 1980, his eyes lit up with surprise. I remember it, he said. That day I was making deliveries, saw Henry's green car speeding out of town. I thought he was late for work. Aaron showed him the photo, and Tom nodded firmly. That's the car. I'll never forget the peeling paint on the right rear corner. That confirmation was like the final piece of the puzzle falling into place. Back at headquarters, Aaron added the new testimony to the investigation board, crossing out the line, Henry at home, unproven. All that had once been foggy was now gradually becoming clear. She stood silently before the photo of Evelyn Shaw, that gentle smile now seeming to look at her, waiting. In the report sent to the county office, Aaron wrote, 1980 statement evidence unreliable. New witness confirms Henry Cole left home on the morning of the disappearance. Recommend interrogating suspects' relatives and verifying locations on map obtained from the house. As she closed the file, she felt something shifting in the shadows of the past, not the dead-end silence anymore, but a new breeze. 40 years later, Henry Cole's lie was finally beginning to crack, revealing beneath it a secret that had never been touched. 2 days after Aaron Vaughn finalized the report on Henry Cole's false statement, she received a call from the Massachusetts State Archives office. An employee named Rachel reported that, during an inventory of undigitized files, they had discovered an old envelope related to the Evelyn Shaw case. It was sent to the Pembroke Police Department in 1982, but it seems it was never thoroughly investigated, Rachel said, her voice full of curiosity. Aaron asked them to forward the document to Boston immediately. When she received the envelope, she had to wear gloves to open it. The paper was yellowed, the edges stuck together from dampness. On the outside, in scrawled handwriting, to the person in charge of the missing teacher case. No sender's address, just an old Marshfield postmark stamped March, 1982. Inside was a sheet of student paper folded into thirds, the ink faded but still legible. The handwriting trembled, as if from someone afraid. She didn't leave Pembroke. Look where the water never freezes, that's all. No signature, no other clues. Aaron read the sentence over and over, her brow furrowed. Water that never freezes. The phrase sounded like a metaphor, or perhaps a real description of a specific place. She spread out the old town map on the table. The lakes around Pembroke all froze over in winter, except for the southern marsh area, where underground springs flowed year-round, keeping the water surface from ever fully freezing. That was exactly the spot circled on the map found in Henry Cole's house. Aaron's heart raced. She leaned back in her chair, closed her eyes for a moment, then picked up the phone and called the Plymouth County Police Department. "I need the forensics team and the geological search unit to Pembroke," she said quickly. "We may have found the burial site." There was silence on the other end for a few seconds, then the commander replied cautiously, "Are you sure? After all these years, there might be nothing left there." Erin replied curtly, "I don't need to be sure, I just need to be right once." That afternoon, she drove back to Pembroke, a light rain falling, the road surface slick. As the car turned onto the dirt road leading to the southern woods, fog had begun to thicken. Erin stopped beside a rusted sign, reading "No trespassing, private land." She turned off the engine, stepped out, her feet sinking deep into the soft mud. The sound of seeping water from underground echoed up, and just as in the letter, the small stream in the woods still flowed, glistening in the afternoon light. "Water that never freezes," she whispered, feeling as if someone was watching her amid the silent rows of trees. The next day, the forensics team arrived with metal detectors and ground-penetrating radar. Erin pointed toward the marshy water area, where she suspected the circled spot on the map was. They began scanning. The screen showed an anomaly, a small mass about 6 feet deep, buried in the damp clay soil. "There's something here," the technician said, eyes glued to the screen. Erin's whole body tensed. She signaled the team to set up barriers and marked the area for exploratory digging. When the first shovel touched the soil, a smell of cold mud mixed with old metal rose up, heavy and unpleasant. A few small objects were found, a piece of beige fabric identical to the type from Evelyn's car, and a scrap of dark leather cord. Everything was collected and sealed. Erin stood still looking at the damp black earth pit, water still seeping up from underground, without stopping, as if the place was trying to hide something. She knew they hadn't found the body yet, but her intuition told her this was both the beginning and the end of Evelyn Shaw. That evening, back at the hotel, Erin placed the anonymous letter on the table next to the woods map and the photo of the silver necklace engraved with ES. She wrote in a short report sent to the office, 1982 anonymous letter source, confirms water that never freezes, location matches coordinates on map found at Henry Cole's house. Residual evidence indicates possibility victim hidden in southern Pembroke Marsh area. Recommend full excavation of the area within a 50-meter radius. As she closed the file folder, Erin looked out the window. Rain was still falling steadily on the glass, reflecting the dim light. Out there, in the dark woods and ceaseless flowing water, Evelyn was perhaps still waiting to be found, waiting for someone patient enough to hear her faint call from deep in the earth. 2 days after the ground-penetrating radar detected the anomaly in the southern Pembroke Marsh, the official excavation began. Early in the morning, forensics vans and Massachusetts State Investigation Unit vehicles lined up along the wet trail leading to the marked area. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still thick gray, steam rising from the ground like thin smoke. Erin Vaughn stood at the edge of the marsh, wearing a windbreaker, holding a noted map, watching the technicians set up white tents and string up caution tape. She had worked many cases, but something about this place made her throat tighten, as if Evelyn was still somewhere very close, just a thin layer of soil away. The sound of the small excavator started up. Layers of dark mud were scraped away slowly and carefully. At about 4.5 feet deep, the technician stopped, bending down. "There's something here," he called out loudly. Erin stepped forward, gloved hands, kneeling beside the pit. Under the pale yellow light, an object glimmered in the mud, a piece of metal bracelet, dull and mud-caked, but still clearly engraved with a small flower pattern. Erin immediately recognized it, the same floral design as on the silver necklace found at Henry Cole's house. She signaled the forensics team to record the location and collect the sample. As they continued digging, another find made the whole team fall silent. A rotten cloth bag was pulled up, containing a few items, a pearl button, a piece of beige fabric, and a long strand of light brown hair still clinging to the cloth. Everything was carefully placed on a steel tray and sealed. Erin looked at the hair strand, feeling her hand tremble slightly. "Send this sample to the lab right away," she said softly. "I want results within 48 hours. At the same time, the forensics team discovered another detail that made the atmosphere heavier. Rust-streaked metal traces mixed in the mud, possibly a piece of a chain clasp or a pin from clothing. All evidence was collected and numbered. As the faint afternoon sunlight filtered through the treetops, the excavation area became eerily quiet. only the slow seeping of water around the dig pit audible. Erin stood watching the evidence boxes being loaded onto the van, her shoes caked in mud, her shirt soaked with sweat. She knew they hadn't found the remains yet, but each piece of metal, each hair strand, was Evelyn's first words after 40 years buried. Late that afternoon, back at headquarters, Erin received a message from the Boston lab: DNA extraction in progress, comparison results expected in 36 hours. She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes. Images of the marsh water, the bracelet, and the anonymous letter flashed through her mind, like the final puzzle pieces fitting together. The next morning, Lydia Tran, the technician who had first helped her analyze the sample, called, her voice trembling with excitement. "Erin, the hair sample matches Evelyn Shaw's DNA perfectly. No doubt about it, she's there." Erin was silent for a few seconds, gripping the phone tightly. "Send the full report to me. I need it for the prosecution file," she replied. When she hung up, she turned to look out the window, where the first dawn light was shining on Oldham Lake, the rays sparkling as if reflecting from the silver bracelet in her hand yesterday. In the report sent to Plymouth County, Erin wrote, "DNA sample confirms victim Evelyn Shaw's burial location. Case officially converted from missing person to first-degree murder investigation." Below that line, she signed her name with a firm stroke. 40 years of silence had ended, and from the cold earth, Evelyn had finally spoken. News of the discovery of evidence and DNA confirmation immediately turned the Evelyn Shaw case into the center of attention in the state of Massachusetts. But for Erin Vaughn, the biggest question remained: who had helped Henry Cole cover up this crime for 40 years? In the old notes of Sergeant Hanley, she found a small detail that few had noticed: the name Margaret Cole, Henry's ex-wife, who had lived with him in the early 1980s. The record showed that the two divorced in 1983, no children, and Margaret moved to live in Maine from then on. At that time, the police did not consider her a suspect, simply because there was no evidence that she knew anything about Evelyn. But now, with the discovery of evidence right in Henry's old house, Erin believed Margaret might be the missing piece. She contacted local authorities in Augusta, Maine, and quickly tracked down Margaret's address, a small house in the suburbs of the city, next to a pine forest, unusually quiet. When Erin arrived, it was already afternoon, with light drizzle falling. The door opened slowly, and a silver-haired woman, about 70 years old, stepped out. Thin build, tired eyes, but her voice was still clear. "I know why you're here." Erin was a bit surprised, but only replied softly, "I need to talk to you about Henry, and about Evelyn Shaw." They sat in the living room, the atmosphere heavy. Margaret looked down at her trembling hands holding a teacup. "I've been waiting for this day," she said, "but also afraid it would come." Erin said nothing, just opened the file, and placed on the table a photo of the silver necklace engraved with ES, the item found in the basement of the old house. Margaret stared at it, her eyes welling up. "Henry kept that in a wooden box, said it was from an old acquaintance. I never asked. Once I wanted to throw it away, but he got so angry in a way I'd never seen." She paused, her voice lowering. "That night in 1980, he came home late, his shirt full of mud. I asked what happened. He said he was just fixing the car, but I knew something was wrong." Erin quietly opened her notebook. "Did you ever see him go anywhere after that?" Margaret nodded, tears falling. "A few days later, he drove me to the swamp area south of Pembroke, said he wanted to clean up the old place. I didn't understand, just knew he was tense. He told me to sit in the car while he went into the woods alone. When he came back, his hands were shaking, and there was a strong smell of damp earth. That night, he made me burn some things, clothes and a map. I didn't dare ask." Erin felt chills all over her body. Every word Margaret said matched exactly with the evidence she had found: the forest map, the wooden box, and the traces of burial in the swamp. "Why didn't you tell the police?" she asked. Margaret looked up, her voice choked. "I was scared. He threatened to kill me if I said anything. When he died, I thought it was all over. But she's still out there." She pointed toward the window, where rain pattered on the treetops, as if Evelyn was still present somewhere amid the cold winds. Erin stood up, gently placing her hand on the old woman's shoulder. "Margaret, what you've said will help Evelyn come home." She nodded, taking from the drawer an old envelope. "I've kept this for years, not daring to open it." Erin opened the envelope. Inside was a photo of Henry, standing next to the pickup truck, with a faint pine crest rod sign in the background. The date blurry, October 14, 1980. The final trace, an irrefutable proof that Henry had been in the forest where Evelyn disappeared. That evening, Erin sent the report to the Plymouth County office, along with Margaret's detailed statement. In the conclusion she wrote, "Confirmation that Margaret Cole was fully aware of Henry Cole's cover-up actions, destroyed evidence, and remained silent for 40 years. Recommend formal interrogation and prosecution for obstruction of investigation." As she left the small house in Augusta, the rain had stopped. Erin looked in the rearview mirror and saw Margaret's silhouette standing silently in the doorway, her thin shoulders trembling. The wet road glistened under the moonlight, leading south, toward Pembroke, where the past was about to be unearthed, one last time. 3 days after the meeting in Augusta, Margaret Cole was brought to the Plymouth County Police Headquarters for formal interrogation. She sat in the small room, cold white neon lights casting down on her gaunt face, her hands clasped so tightly that the knuckles stood out. Erin Vaughn sat across from her, placing before her the thick file, evidence, photos, DNA results, and her own statement. There was nothing left to hide, only the final truth. In the long moment of silence, Erin spoke in a soft but firm voice. "Mrs. Margaret, we know Henry Cole was responsible for Evelyn Shaw's death, but you can help her come home, if you tell us the rest." Margaret didn't respond right away. After a while, she slightly raised her head, her gaze distant, as if looking through the interrogation room wall. "I've lived with that ghost for 40 years, she said, her voice trembling. "Every night I hear the sound of water, like it's whispering underground." Erin didn't interrupt, just nodded slightly for her to continue. "The night Evelyn disappeared, Henry came back very late, covered in mud. I asked, he said he just got the car stuck in the woods. But his eyes, I'll never forget them. I knew he had just done something terrible." She took a deep breath, her voice choking. "The next day, he made me get in the car with him, said we had to clean up, because he didn't want anyone getting curious. He drove to the swamp south of Pembroke, where there's a stream that flows year-round. He made me stand watch on the road. I heard the sound of digging, heavy breathing, and the smell of damp earth, mixed with rust. When he came back, I saw in the trunk a beige cloth and a small bag. He said nothing, just told me to go home and burn everything that had mud on it. That night, I burned it, and I saw in the fire Evelyn's gray scarf." Tears rolled down her cheeks. Erin stayed silent, letting the tape recorder run. "When I asked Henry, he said she stopped screaming, and now she's silent forever. I was terrified, but didn't dare report to the police. He threatened to bury me with her if I said anything. I lived like that for years. When we divorced, he said he'd take that secret to the grave." Margaret paused, looking straight at Erin. "But he couldn't hide it anymore, could he?" Erin shook her head, her voice low. "No, ma'am. Evelyn has been found, but we need to know exactly where he buried her." Margaret was silent for a very long time, then reached for the glass of water, her voice shaking but clear. "While I was standing outside waiting, I saw a large rock covered in green moss, right near where water seeped from the ground. Behind that rock, he dug a shallow hole. I remember because there was a tree struck by lightning, its top bare, right to the side." Erin immediately jotted it down. She knew exactly the spot, the area where they had stopped when the radar signaled, just a few meters from the old excavation site. The very next morning, Erin returned to the scene with the forensics team. Mrs. Margaret came along, under the supervision of 2 officers. When they arrived, she pointed with a trembling hand toward the corner of the swamp. "There," she said, "under that rock." The forensics team began digging. Layer after layer of waterlogged soil lifted in silence. In less than an hour, a small bone fragment appeared in the mud, then the arm bone, followed by a piece of beige cloth wrapped around it. Erin stood still, her heart pounding, speechless. When the entire body was recovered, DNA confirmation matched Evelyn Shaw. The wind from the lake blew through, carrying the smell of water and earth, cold to the bone. Margaret bowed her head, tears falling silently. Now she can rest in peace. Erin placed her hand on her shoulder. "Thank you." Justice came late, but it still came. That afternoon, at the police station, Erin wrote the final report on the excavation. Thanks to Margaret Cole's statement, the victim's body was found under the moss-covered rock, near the swamp south of Pembroke. The 1980 disappearance confirmed as homicide. Victim Evelyn M. Shaw, perpetrator Henry Cole, accomplice in cover-up Margaret Cole. She signed her name, looking out the window, where the afternoon sun stretched long over the wet grass. 40 years of darkness finally had light, and Evelyn Shaw, the forgotten one, had been found in the cold earth by the trembling confession of the woman who once stood beside her killer. On Monday morning, April 12, 2021, America woke up to a series of big headlines on local front pages. 1980 Massachusetts mystery disappearance, finally solved. Evelyn Shaw's body found after 41 years. Suspect's ex-wife admits to helping cover up crime. The news spread like a storm. Regional New England TV channels continuously aired footage of the swamp area south of Pembroke, where the forensics team had set up white tents amid the waterlogged mud streaks. Reporters crowded outside the police tape, cameras zooming in on every detail: the silver necklace engraved with ES, the moss-covered rock, the sealed evidence bags. Meanwhile, the Plymouth County Police Department was flooded with calls and emails from national media. Erin Vaughn, the lead investigator, became the center of every question. In the noon press conference, she stood at the podium, her face calm, but her eyes full of emotion. "We confirm the body found in Pembroke is that of teacher Evelyn M. Shaw, missing since October 14, 1980, she said slowly. The investigation shows the perpetrator was Henry Cole, the victim's neighbor, now deceased. His ex-wife Margaret Cole has admitted to knowing about the incident and helping cover it up. She will be prosecuted for obstruction of justice and destruction of evidence." Dozens of flashes went off at once. Someone asked, "Why has this case caused such a shock, ma'am?" Erin replied succinctly, "Because Pembroke is a small town, and sometimes the devil lives right next door." That very afternoon, the local community was shaken. Residents gathered in front of Evelyn's old house, now owned by another family, to lay flowers and candles in remembrance. A large printed portrait of the young teacher was placed in the yard, surrounded by hundreds of handwritten notes. "You were not forgotten," an elderly woman, once Evelyn's student, told reporters through tears. "She always told us to believe in goodness, to believe that truth would prevail. Today I think she's been proven right." On social media, the hashtag #JusticeForEvelynShaw spread across the eastern states. Thousands shared the story, not just for its tragedy, but because it spoke to something bigger, that technology and perseverance can bring justice, even after 40 years. Evening TV news replayed video of Erin leading the investigation team through the swamp. Damp, cold scene, wind blowing through the trees, golden light casting on her face, both determined and weary. A WBZ TV commentator remarked, "There are cases that aren't just stories of crime, but stories of memory, the memory of a community that refuses to forget." And in Augusta, Maine, footage of Margaret Cole being escorted from her home appeared on the evening news. She walked slowly, her face pale, wearing an old beige sweater. When a reporter asked, "Do you regret it?" she only replied softly, "I've regretted it for 40 years. Her lawyer stated that his client is ready to fully cooperate with investigators to atone for the mistake. Public opinion was divided into two camps, one side believing she was a victim of psychological abuse controlled by Henry, the other believing that silence for 4 decades was unforgivable complicity. That night, Erin returned to her small apartment in Boston, turned on the TV but muted the sound. Images of the case filled the screen, footage, interviews, tears, and her own face at the press conference. She turned it off, sat looking at the files spread on the table. In her mind echoed Margaret's voice in the interrogation room. "I hear the water every night." Erin smiled sadly. Evelyn had finally been found, but the price for the truth was too high. Outside, the April wind blew through the window, carrying the salty scent of the sea and the smell of early apple blossoms. Boston sank into silence, but in Pembroke, people still gathered around the small house by the lake, lighting candles all night. After 41 years, that peaceful town suddenly became the nation's focal point, where justice had finally spoken, and the darkness had been torn apart by light. The trial of Margaret Cole took place in early September 2021 at Plymouth District Court in Massachusetts, amid an atmosphere watched by the entire state. Outside the courthouse, dozens of reporters, cameras, and locals gathered from early morning, crowding behind metal barricades. The crowd carried flowers, photos of Evelyn Shaw, and signs reading, "Justice doesn't expire. Justice never expires." The late summer sunlight streamed through the large windows, reflecting off the stern face of Judge Linda Harkins, who presided over the case seen as a symbol of justice delayed. In the courtroom, Aaron Vaughn sat in the front row, silent, clutching a thick file tightly. 40 years of searching for the truth now converged in this room. Margaret entered, her small frame in a simple gray sweater. There was no arrogance of a criminal, just the weary and sad eyes of someone who had lived too long in guilt. She bowed her head as the prosecutor read the charges. Defendant Margaret Cole is indicted on 2 counts, obstruction of justice and destruction of evidence in the 1980 murder case of victim Evelyn Shaw. The scratch of the jury's pens echoed, mingled with the murmurs of the crowd. Prosecutor Andrew McCall stood up, his voice firm. The defendant did not directly cause Evelyn's death, but her silence prolonged this pain for 4 decades. Without her, the perpetrator Henry Cole would not have been able to bury his crime and live out the rest of his life in peace. He presented to the court the silver necklace engraved with E.S., the map found in the basement, and the recording of Margaret's confession. Each time her trembling voice rang out, "I was afraid he would bury me with her if I spoke up." The entire courtroom fell silent. The defense attorney countered that Margaret was a victim of mental abuse and absolute control from her ex-husband. He cited medical records showing she had been abused and isolated from the outside world by Henry. A woman threatened, locked in fear, cannot act like a free citizen. She didn't choose silence, she was forced into silence. Those words momentarily softened Aaron's heart. She remembered Margaret's eyes in the interrogation room, fearful, yet pleading for forgiveness. 3 days of arguments passed, tense and emotional. The final witness called was Aaron. As she took the stand, the courtroom hushed. She recounted the journey to crack the case, from the tiny DNA sample, the map in the basement, to the anonymous letter. When the prosecutor asked, "Do you think Margaret is guilty?" Aaron paused for a second, before responding slowly, "I think she's at fault, but the fault of fear. The real crime belongs to the man who killed Evelyn and forced her to live with that ghost for the rest of her life." On sentencing day, rain poured down. Judge Harkins looked straight at the defendant. "Margaret Cole, the court acknowledges your cooperation in helping uncover the truth and return the victim's remains to her family. However, your silence delayed justice for 41 years. The court sentences you to 3 years of probation, supervised release, and community service." In the courtroom, no one cheered. There was only a soft sigh of relief. Aaron stepped outside, breathing in the humid, rainy air of the city. The press rushed forward, but she said only one thing: "Justice isn't always a sentence. Sometimes, it's just the truth spoken after too many years of silence." Then she left, leaving behind the courtroom, where the lights were fading, as if finally, the Evelyn Shaw case could close in peace. A month after the trial, Pembroke was quiet again, as before. But in the heart of that small town, the silence was no longer fear, but relief. At the edge of the southern forest, where the investigation team had once exhumed Evelyn Shaw's remains, local authorities erected a simple gray granite memorial plaque. On it was engraved, "In memory of Evelyn M. Shaw, 1948, 19, gone but never forgotten." Below was a quote from the diary, once found in her old house: "The truth may sleep, but it never dies." On the dedication day, early autumn skies, with gentle sun and light wind rustling through the oak leaves, locals turned out in droves, bringing white flowers, candles, and even Evelyn's former students, now middle-aged, with graying hair. Aaron Vaughn arrived early, in a dark suit. She stood silently for a moment by the memorial, her eyes toward the sun-glistened pond, the former burial ground of silence. Beside her was Claire Donovan, Evelyn's closest friend, now living in Vermont. Trembling, she placed a bouquet of white daisies at the base of the plaque, whispering, "Evelyn always said she believed in people, even when they hurt her. Maybe today she still believes, because finally, someone found the truth." Aaron just nodded, saying nothing. In the wind, she heard the rustle of leaves like someone smiling softly. The memorial ceremony was brief but emotional. Sheriff Donnelly spoke, his voice choked. "We owe Evelyn Shaw and her family an apology. It took over 4 decades for us to bring her home, but we did it." Many cried as the local choir sang Amazing Grace. Under the sunset, candles were lit, reflecting on the water, a scene both peaceful and heartbreaking. That evening, Aaron returned to her small lakeside inn by Oldham Pond, where she had written her first lines in the investigation journal. The room was unchanged, files, black and white photos of Evelyn pinned to the board, and a thick notebook. She opened to the last page, writing slowly, Evelyn Shaw, case closed October 14, 2021. Victim located, perpetrator identified, accomplice admitted guilt. Justice delayed, but it came. Some cases don't end in prison, but in the peace of souls and the perseverance of people. She paused, looking at the victim's photo, then gently closed the notebook. Before leaving Pembroke, Erin stopped by the old elementary school where Evelyn had taught. The small classroom was at the end of the hall, the blackboard still bearing faint chalk marks, as if someone had just written, "Have faith." She placed a white daisy on the teacher's desk and looked around. In that space, memories seemed to linger, children's laughter, the smell of painted wood, and the image of the young woman smiling in the window light. Erin imagined Evelyn, kind eyes, gentle smile, patient stance amid her students, and she silently promised, "I won't let your name fade away again." A few weeks later, the story of the Evelyn Shaw case aired on the documentary Cold Justice Revisited. Viewers across America sent letters to the Plymouth County Police Department, thanking those who had persevered for decades. One letter from a teacher in Oregon read, "Evelyn's story makes me believe that kindness is never in vain, even when it's buried." Erin read the letter and smiled. That was the moment she realized justice is sometimes not a verdict, but an extension of human faith in one another. When leaving Pembroke for the last time, Erin pulled over on the road, leading out of town. She looked in the rearview mirror, the memorial shrinking in view, but the sunlight reflecting off the stone made it sparkle like a beacon. She whispered, "Rest in peace, Evelyn." Wind from the lake blew through, carrying salty mist, mixed with the scent of earth and wet grass, like a reply from afar. 41 years had passed, and finally the town of Pembroke was freed from the shadows, not just because justice was served, but because the truth had finally been spoken. Evelyn Shaw was no longer a forgotten victim, she had become a symbol of the belief that justice, though late, is still justice. That winter came earlier than usual. The first snow blanketed the small roads of Pembroke white, making the town look like an old photo forgotten by time. But for Erin Vaughn, this was no longer a land of ghosts, but a place where she left a piece of her soul. She stood on the hill overlooking the lake, where the winter sun reflected sparkling on Evelyn Shaw's memorial plaque. Everything had closed, but the emptiness in her heart lingered, that familiar feeling at the end of every case, when justice was served, but too late to save what was lost. She recalled the grueling months, rain pattering on the precinct roof, yellow lamplight on yellowed files, the cold earth smell of the swamp, and Margaret's fearful eyes in the interrogation. It all played out like a slow-motion film, painful, persistent, then quietly dissolving. Erin had seen many cases end, but none had made her believe in the words, justice like this, not the flashy kind, but justice of endurance, of people who don't abandon faith, even when darkness swallows everything around them. On the road out of town, she stopped at the sign reading Pembroke 2 miles. Cold wind blew through, swirling the first snowflakes in the air. She pulled a small envelope from her bag, a photo of young Evelyn she'd kept throughout the investigation, and placed it on the passenger seat. "You've come home," Erin said softly. "No one can reclaim 40 years, but at least your name won't be in the missing column anymore." As the car drove away, the radio replayed the morning news. The Evelyn Shaw case, a symbol of perseverance and DNA technology, has inspired the re-investigation of over 30 other missing persons files across the state. Erin smiled. That was the real reward, not fame or praise, but the sense that Evelyn's journey would pave the way for other forgotten souls. Late afternoon, snow began falling heavily. On Oldham Pond, ice was forming, leaving only a small patch of open water silently reflecting the purple sky. Erin knew, though leaving, she would always carry that image, an unfrozen patch of water, a reminder that some stories are never buried. Somewhere, amid the silence of snow and wind, it seemed a voice whispered softly, "Thank you." She looked up, smiled, then drove on toward Boston. After 41 years, justice had come, belatedly but completely, and in Pembroke the snow still fell, peaceful as if no pain had ever touched the place. In today's American life, the story of Evelyn Shaw in Pembroke reminds us that justice delayed still requires people and communities that don't give up. The perseverance of investigator Aaron Vaughn, from revisiting the 1980 files, sending the beige fabric sample and hair fibers for testing, to comparing DNA genealogy, shows that technology is just the key, while the door opens thanks to discipline, meticulous record-keeping, and community cooperation. The anonymous letter "Water Never Freezes" and the necklace engraved ES found in Henry Cole's basement remind us that small details can save a case. Therefore, in everyday life, save information, photos, messages, doorbell cameras, those scraps that can piece together the truth when needed. Margaret Cole, living for many years in fear, also reflects the reality of domestic violence and control in America. If you see signs of threats, isolation, belongings being destroyed, clothes stained with unexplainable mud, seek safe help, hotlines, local organizations, because prolonged silence only adds to the pain for everyone. The media pressure and rumors that once surrounded Pembroke are a reminder for us to share information responsibly, prioritizing official sources. Don't turn victims or innocent people into targets of speculation. The memorial by the swamp and the simple plaque show that healing begins when the community acknowledges the loss and honors the memory. In our own neighborhoods, we can foster a culture of mutual care, watching out for elderly neighbors, listening to teachers, supporting families in crisis. Finally, the decision to reopen the cold case in 2020 reminds us to support budgets and policies for long-term investigations, as well as serious discussions about sharing genealogical DNA with informed consent, so that other Evelyns are no longer buried under the ice of time. Thank you for joining us to the end of the Evelyn Shaw story, a journey that reminds us that the truth can be buried, but it cannot be forgotten. Please hit subscribe to continue with us reopening other cold cases, and see you in the next video.